let's make an 1850s spring meal. Good day everyone, my name is Caitlin. I'm a living historian who educates other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying original garments, which is what we usually do. I've been doing a lot more research into meal planning of the 19th century and making not only just the dishes, which is what I usually do for living history sometimes, is make actual dishes, but making actual meals like people would have made back then. But it's one of those things I don't have a lot of opportunity to practice too much, so we've started doing it just on the channel, just in my regular everyday kitchen, and making an actual meal. Eventually, the goal for this segment is for me to have most of the things being grown or raised on the property, and I can share with you, because we do heritage breed animals and heritage plants, and share with you exactly what is being used and talking about these types of ingredients and all that as well. We were working our way up to that. We've only done, this is our second video, so we did a winter meal, and I think the only thing from the farm were the chickens, but granted we had just moved, so we're gonna add a few more today. Not very many, but just a few. Our meal plan today comes from What Shall We Have for Dinner, which is an 1850s resource that was actually written by Mrs. Dickens, so Charles Dickens' wife, Catherine Dickens. And in it is just a whole lot of meal plans. They were called bills of fare back in the day. And she just lists out all these bills of fare for plain families, or just basically what we'd call a upper working class or lower middle class family. And then she lists them by when they were in season. Now this is Mrs. Dickens, so she is writing from England, so it's when things are in season there. So I have had to adapt just a little bit, because when things are in season in England are not when they are in season here in Texas. And so there is a little bit of adjustment to make, but it is a good starting point. So the one we are going to be using today is another beef recipe, which is what we used last time, and I wanted to do something different, but I don't have a chicken I can butcher right now. We butchered them, all the ones we were going to butcher, we butchered before we moved, so I have to raise up a new generation for that. So we're going to use some beef that I found in my freezer. The bill of fare that Mrs. Dickens puts out is going to include beef. It just says beef, no recipe included, or even the type of beef, it just says beef, mashed potatoes, salad, cold lamb. And so that's going to be the main meal. And then actually lists two desserts. There's a macaroni, and then there is a pudding, specifically a rice pudding. There's also a horseradish sauce to be served with the beef, is what it says. So I wanted to do something different than what we did last time. Last time we did, I think, rolled ribs of beef, I believe is what we had. And so I've opted for a beef pie, which is going to include, of course, making a pie crust. It's going to include the actual beef component that we're going to cut up with some onions and actually make the beef pie. And then we are going to make a different horseradish sauce than I did last time, so I can compare the two. I wasn't going to do the same sauce because, well, that's kind of boring to have two things right in a row. But I had never made horseradish sauce before, and as soon as I mentioned to Rhett that we were having horseradish sauce, he lit up and was like, oh, I love horseradish. So because he likes it so much, we're going to do it again, but we're going to do a different recipe, and I can decide which one I like best. We are also going to be doing the mashed potatoes, of course. I found a good recipe for it, which is basically what I do today. It's mashed potatoes. How hard can you mess those up, right? And so we are actually going to be using some potatoes from my garden. My potatoes aren't quite ready yet, but I did have a plant that just kind of keeled over, and so I dug up the potatoes that were around it. So I have a few new potatoes, but we're going to have to supplement with store-bought potatoes. So technically, but technically I am counting it for being partially grown on the property. Potatoes are something that we're probably never going to get to a mid-19th century variety, simply because of the potato blight that happened in the early to mid-19th century. The earliest potatoes, the earliest variety of potatoes I can even get that I've ever been able to find is 1868. So I don't even have any of those. I need to go buy some more. So we're using more of a modern variety today, even the ones that I'm growing myself, unfortunately. And that's where we're going to differ some. So there are two meats included into this meal plan, which granted a lot of the bills of fare do include two meats, even for the plain family dinners. Lamb is kind of hard to get here. It can be more expensive, and although we do plan to run sheep probably by next year, that is not now. And so we're going to opt to not do the lamb, only because, well, A, it's expensive, B, we don't have access to lamb right now, and C, there's only two of us. We don't need two meats for a single meal. So I think we're just going to stick with the beef today. Next year we're going to be doing a whole lot more, hopefully, with mutton and lamb. So I'm just going to scrap the lamb entirely for this meal. We're just going to omit it. And then it says salad for the vegetable. Unfortunately, as things sometimes happen, my lettuce did not make this year. And so I'm going to be substituting something that have grown pretty well in my garden, which is peas. So we're going to have peas instead. And then for the desserts. So macaroni, I've never had a sweet macaroni. They seem to be quite popular based on the receipt books, having several recipes for sweet macaroni, and I've never had a sweet macaroni pudding. And so I would like to try it, but I don't want to make a big batch in case we just don't care for it. And so I think we're gonna make a very small macaroni, like a type of pudding. And if it's not good, it goes to the pigs. That's just below the standards for human consumption. We feed it to the pigs and they turn it into bacon. That's actually why I really like having the pigs around. So I'm actually going to be doing a voiceover today for while I'm cooking, mostly because I have a dehydrator going in the background in my kitchen right now, and I didn't think y'all wanted to hear that whirring while I was explaining the directions and what I was doing. So I'll just show you footage and I'll just read the recipes out as I'm doing them, and hopefully that'll all make sense. Alright, we're going to start with the steak pie. I'm going to be using 1850's The Practical Cookbook's Directions for Common Paste, which would be the pastry. It's on page 149. It says cut half a pound of butter, add shortening into 1 quart of flour, add a teaspoonful of salt, enough water to make a soft dough, flour your molding board, and roll out the dough for your pies, but do not mold it. So that's basically what I did. I took half a pound of butter. It's actually very similar to the pie crust recipe I typically use. There's just a slightly higher ratio of butter to flour in this one, so I'm curious to see how it turns out. Usually I would do 3 cups of flour to 1 cup of butter. And I added a little bit less than a teaspoonful of salt because I was already using salted butter for this, and then just added water. And I've learned in the past, use really cold water. It makes your dough form a little bit better. Then I just rolled out, put it into my pie tin, and got to work on the actual filling. So there are lots of ways to make beefsteak pies. Some of them include potatoes, some of them include just the beef, and some of it's onions and meat. Sometimes it tells you to cook the onions first and then add the meat. There's 1855, The Practical American Cookbook, or Practical and Scientific Cookery, pages 83 to 84, says various other pies. Hot pies may be made with mutton. They can also be made with a fillet of beef cut into thin slices the size of a chop, or with rump steak, by laying a piece at the bottom, seasoned, and filling alternately with potatoes and meat. You may omit the potatoes. And then it talks about veal pies or rabbits and fowls, and it says you can add a chopped onion. You can make these pies of any size, either large enough for a family dinner or small, round, or oval for a corner dish for a party. If you wish the paste to look very nice, egg it over well before putting it in to bake. If you wish it to be white, only use the white of an egg well beaten. If yellow, use the whole egg. 1851's The Frugal Cook on page 1920 says for their beefsteak pie, beat your steaks well in order to make them eat tender, season them with salt, pepper, and a little ketchup. Then line the edge of the dish with paste, put in the steaks with a little water, cover the whole with a good crust, ornament it as directed for meat pies, and bake it. Again, there's really no directions for actually baking this. I ended up going ahead and chopping up an onion and putting it in with some butter and basically just caramelizing them. I really dislike raw onion. I don't like the crunch or the texture that it has. I want them to be extremely soft. So to make sure that they were extremely soft for my own palate, I went ahead and cooked them first and then put them in with the beef. And I did put the salt, the pepper, and a little bit of ketchup onto the beef as well. I used regular tomato ketchup. There's also mushroom ketchup. There's several varieties of ketchup back in the day. And I used to have some that I had made from scratch, but unfortunately we had used it all up, so we're just using store-bought H-E-B brand ketchup for this, because that is what is in my fridge. Now to decorate this pie after I put on the top crust, the Frugal Cook says, mark the edge all around with the point of a knife or with a spoon in various patterns according to taste. Then make 8 leaves and place them pointing from the center, in which you put a rose if preferred. Put ornaments in the corners, 2 leaves and 1 bud in each corner, but for meat pies, always put a center ornament. So it's been a while since I've actually been able to decorate a pie like this, which was a lot of fun. Now I have a ton of cake decorating supplies. I could have made this super fancy and nice with all my molds and all my cutters or something. I decided to go a little bit more period and see what I could do with just a knife and typical cutlery. And then I made the leaves, I put a rose, and my pie was round so it didn't have corners. I did a bud and 2 leaves in 3 places on the edge. And then I put it in the oven for 350 until the top was baked, about 30 minutes or so I think. In the meanwhile, I worked on the horseradish sauce. This one comes from 1854's The Modern Housewife's Receipt Book. It says take the yolk of a hard egg, mash it down with a soft one, mix it up with half a teaspoonful of fine powdered sugar, 1 of mustard, grate it over a half stick of horseradish, mix well together with 2 tablespoonfuls of cream and 3 of vinegar. says it's the most excellent sauce for roast or meat. I took the yolk of a hard-boiled egg and the yolk of a soft-boiled egg, and I mixed it very well with the, after mashing it with a fork, mixed it with a little bit of fine powdered sugar. And I wasn't sure if they meant like mustard as in grated mustard seed or if they meant like prepared mustard. But I think they would have said prepared mustard if they had meant prepared mustard. So I just did the seasoning itself. And I used some prepared horseradish because that is what I have. Now I actually have horseradish growing in the garden right now. It is just not ready to be harvested. So maybe we come back next year, we can actually do this with real horseradish. But I just used a little bit of prepared horseradish, which had a little bit of vinegar already in it. So I omitted 1 of the tablespoonfuls of vinegar. I just did 2 of cream and 2 of vinegar to hopefully cut down on the acidity just a little bit. And that just got put to the side where I can work on something else. So next I started with the peas. I used 1855's The Practical American Cookbook. On page 104, it says peas boiled. It said pick them over well. After they are shelled, do not wash them. Put them into boiling water, adding a little salt for about 15 minutes. Drain them through a colander and put them into a dish with a little butter. As peas grow old, boil them longer. They may be garnished with scalded mint. I am quite accustomed to very well seasoning my vegetables, and so only having salt in them was a little bit jarring to me. There's usually like 5 or 6 things I would add to peas, but we're trying to follow the recipe. Spices can be difficult or expensive to obtain in this time period, so I'm going to try it this way. I'm not opposed to throwing something on there after as I'm eating it. And then for the potatoes, I use 1850's Practical Cookbook, page 95. It says potatoes may be served in various forms. When boiled tender, put 2 or 3 according to their size in a cloth. Pound them with a wooden spoon, then squeeze them tightly and drop them upon your dish in a white ball. You may mash them with a little milk, butter, and salt and make them into any form you prefer. So this is just basic boiled potatoes that we are seasoning and making mashed potatoes. So the part about putting it into a cloth is just how you're going to mash them without like an actual masher, which I didn't find a cloth that would really work for this. I used to have a very thin gauzy cheesecloth that I think would be excellent for this purpose, but I couldn't find it. All I could find was like my muslin type cheesecloth, which the potatoes wouldn't go through. And so I ended up having to mash them with a fork. So it's not quite to period standards. They would have preferred a really smooth mash. So I tried my best with that, and then added a little bit of that fresh butter, some salt, and a little milk, and then I formed them into the shape of a heart because that was the easiest thing that I could contrive. And now for the desserts. I'm actually going to start with the blackberry jam because I'm going to need a little bit of that for the macaroni. So with the blackberry jam, I'm using 1859's The Cottager's Calendar of Garden Operations. It's page 66. It says to every pound of fruit well bruised, add half a pint of water and half a pound of coarse moist sugar. Boil for 3/4 of an hour in a common saucepan over a clear, low fire. It is much improved if, when sufficiently done, the juice of 1 or 2 lemons is squeezed into it. So this is going to be a fresh jam. Now, I didn't have quite a pound of fruit, but it was a very easy recipe to follow. Just add half the weight of sugar as you do fruit. So I used about 3/8 of a cup of sugar for that. And about 3/4 of a cup of water worked for that. No pectin. I did add a little bit of lemon juice at the very end, and that's just for color purposes. And then after that, I could get started with the macaroni. So I'm using 1854's The Cook and Housewife's Manual, page 484. It says sweet macaroni pudding. Simmer the macaroni in milk and water for 15 minutes. Add new milk to thin it, and when cold, add 3 beat yolks of eggs. Season with nutmeg, cinnamon, and a little almond flour water, and sweeten with fine sugar. A little ginger wine or lemon wine is an improvement. A layer of orange marmalade or apricot jam in the center of the pudding is an excellent addition. It may be steamed or baked. Stick blanched almonds sliced longwise around the edges. Now for this, I did have to make a couple of changes. So I did use some macaroni noodles, which I had a ton of, so I wasn't worried about wasting these. And I also had a ton of milk. So this is actually a really good time to try this recipe to see if I like sweet macaroni. So I did boil it in milk, and when it was done, I didn't think I needed to add any more milk to thin it because it didn't tell me how much milk to add at the beginning, so I feel like it was still pretty runny. So I felt like it was still pretty runny. And then I added the 3 yolks of eggs, and I seasoned with fresh ground nutmeg, cinnamon. I didn't have any almond flour water, so I used a little almond extract in there. And I sweetened it. Sweetened's going to be, and with all these period dessert recipes, it's sweetened to taste, so I sweetened it to taste. I don't keep ginger or lemon wine. I don't have any wine in the house, so I did add just a tiny bit of lemon extract just for that, a little bit more flavor to it. And then I put half of my pudding into my pudding mold, which I have an antique pudding mold. And then I put a little layer of my jam in there and then put the rest of the macaroni on top. And I prefer my puddings baked. I don't particularly care for the wetness of a steamed pudding. That's just not my personal preference. So I did bake it since it gave me that option. And with that, all of our recipes are done. We are ready to plate and eat.